I used to believe that my life was a masterpiece of precision, a tapestry woven with trust, passion, and shared dreams. My name is Cortland, and for years I thought I had found the perfect partner in Bryony. We lived in a stylish loft in a vibrant part of the city, a space filled with laughter, late-night conversations, and quiet moments of tenderness. Bryony possessed an effortless grace. Her smile could illuminate the darkest day, and her unwavering support made every challenge seem surmountable. Every morning, I would wake to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of our favorite jazz record playing in the background. Our weekends were spent exploring art galleries, dining at hidden bistros, or simply lying in bed, lost in our shared reveries. I cherished her deeply, convinced that our connection was immune to the trivialities of life. In my eyes, Bryony was not only my wife but the embodiment of all that was pure and beautiful. Yet beneath this polished veneer, subtle cracks began to appear, small anomalies that I dismissed as mere quirks of a busy life. A text left unanswered, a late return from an evening out, or a fleeting moment when her eyes seemed distant. I pushed these thoughts aside, attributing them to the inevitable ebb and flow of any long-term relationship. After all, love, as I understood it, required a leap of faith, a blind trust in the other person's devotion. As days turned into months, I began to notice an undercurrent of change. Bryony's laughter, once spontaneous and bright, now sometimes carried a tinge of melancholy. The gentle intimacy that had defined our evenings was slowly replaced by guarded silences. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps she was simply stressed by work or caught up in the demands of our social lives. I clung to the memories of better times, confident that any strain could be overcome by our commitment to each other. Still, I could not shake an inexplicable feeling of unease. I found myself replaying moments in my mind, the way her phone vibrated incessantly during our dinner, the furtive glances she cast over her shoulder as if afraid of being seen. In the quiet moments before sleep, my thoughts would wander to dark, unsettling possibilities. Yet each time, I convinced myself that these were nothing more than the manifestations of an overactive imagination, a man haunted by the ghosts of past insecurities. I documented these fleeting doubts in a worn leather journal, a habit from my early days as a writer. Each entry was a silent plea for clarity, a desperate search for a truth that might restore my faith. I wrote of love and loss, of trust and betrayal, without ever imagining that the pages of my journal would one day serve as the repository of a devastating secret. Our home, once a sanctuary of shared dreams, began to feel like a stage for a play whose script I did not understand. The familiar walls now echoed with questions, and the very air seemed charged with a tension I could neither define nor dispel. And so, I continued to live my life, smiling, working, and loving, while a silent storm brewed beneath the surface. It was during one of those quiet evenings, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker to life, that I first sensed a chill of disquiet. Bryony had gone to her regular evening class at the gym, a routine she'd recently adopted with fervor. I had always supported her desire to stay fit and healthy, never suspecting that this newfound passion might harbor secrets of its own. Little did I know that behind the sleek glass doors of that gym lay the first threads of a betrayal that would unravel my world. As I traced my fingertips along the condensation on the window, I resolved that I would remain vigilant, that I would hold onto the hope that our love could weather any storm. I promised myself that no matter what secrets the coming days might reveal, I would confront them with the same strength and determination that had defined our years together. I could not, would not, allow the illusions of perfection to blind me to the truth. That night, as the city slumbered under a velvet sky, I made a silent vow. I would be the keeper of our memories, the guardian of our past, and the one who would confront whatever fate had in store for us. I clung to the belief that even if shadows crept into the brightest corners of our life, the light of our love would ultimately prevail. And so, with a heart full of hope and trepidation, I closed my eyes, unaware that the dawn would bring revelations that would shatter my very soul. The morning after a seemingly ordinary day, I awoke to an unsettling silence in our once vibrant loft. Bryony had left for her gym session earlier than usual, and the quiet absence of her laughter filled the space with an ominous stillness. I busied myself with the daily routines, yet an inexplicable tension clung to me like a shadow. Every so often, I would catch myself staring at our closed bedroom door, wondering what secrets lay behind it. Over the next few days, the anomalies multiplied. Bryony's texts grew more cryptic, her explanations for late nights became more rehearsed. I began to notice that she avoided certain topics, and when I asked about her time at the gym, her smile faltered ever so slightly. Despite my inner turmoil, I continued to mask my growing unease with a facade of calm determination. I told myself that the strength of our bond could overcome any minor deviation. But one particular evening would set the wheels of fate irrevocably in motion. I returned home early from a late meeting at work, earlier than usual, only to find Bryony hurriedly gathering her things. Her eyes met mine, and in that brief exchange I saw a flash of panic, quickly masked by forced composure. She mumbled something about a change in her workout schedule and then left, almost as if she were fleeing from a scene she dreaded to confront. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind churned with unanswered questions, each more unsettling than the last. I replayed the day's events in a loop, dissecting every glance, every hesitation. The more I pondered, the more convinced I became that something was terribly wrong. I began to wonder if my suspicions were unfounded, if perhaps I was simply succumbing to paranoia. But deep within, a gnawing certainty whispered that the truth was lurking just out of reach. Unable to shake the feeling, I started paying closer attention. I began casually inquiring about her gym routine, asking for details about her trainer and the classes she attended. Bryony would answer with vague generalities, always steering the conversation away from specifics. It was during one such conversation that I first heard the name Darian. She mentioned him in passing, referring to him as her new personal trainer, a man whose reputation, she claimed, was impeccable. The name struck me with a cold intensity. There was something about the way she said it, almost too casually, that made my heart skip a beat. I recalled that moment, the slight inflection in her voice that betrayed more than a mere mention of a trainer. Questions began to accumulate in my mind, each one a seed of doubt that threatened to bloom into undeniable proof of betrayal. I resolved to dig deeper. Over the next few days, I found myself checking her phone when she left it momentarily unattended and scrutinizing her social media accounts for any hint of an illicit affair. The more I looked, the more I discovered small, almost imperceptible clues: a heart emoji exchanged with someone named Darian, a photograph from a gym session that showed a casual, yet unmistakably intimate, pose between her and her trainer. With each new piece of evidence, the tapestry of my perfect life began to unravel. The pain of betrayal was like a slow poison, seeping into the depths of my soul. I felt a mixture of disbelief and anger, a cruel irony that the woman I had loved so completely could hide such secrets behind her gentle smile. At night, as I lay awake in the darkness of our bedroom, I imagined the scene: Bryony laughing and flirting with Darian, the warm touch of his hand on her shoulder, a touch that was not meant for me. The thought was a knife twisting in my chest. Yet even as the evidence mounted, I struggled to accept the truth. Part of me clung to the hope that there was an explanation, a misunderstanding, a harmless dalliance that meant nothing. I told myself that people made mistakes, that forgiveness was the bedrock of love. But the whispers of betrayal grew louder, drowning out the soft reassurances of my heart. Unable to bear the uncertainty, I made a decision that would forever alter the course of my life. I would confront the truth head-on. I began secretly recording snippets of our conversations and noting every suspicious encounter. I created a detailed journal, meticulously logging dates, times, and the fleeting expressions on Bryony's face when the topic of Darian arose. With every entry, my resolve hardened. I was determined to uncover the full extent of her betrayal, and I vowed that I would not be a passive victim of deception. In the solitude of those long, agonizing nights, the lines between love and hate blurred. I found myself oscillating between despair and a cold, calculated anger. The man I had once been, gentle, forgiving, and optimistic, was slowly being replaced by someone fueled by the desire for retribution. and though I had not yet taken any overt action, the seeds of vengeance were being sown in the quiet recesses of my mind. By the end of that tumultuous week, the truth was staring me in the face. Bryony's life was not as perfect as I had believed. The cracks in our relationship had widened into chasms, and I was left to wonder, had I ever truly known her at all? The weight of that realization was both paralyzing and galvanizing. I resolved that I would no longer be shackled by the chains of betrayal. I would forge a path toward a reckoning that was long overdue. And so, as the days darkened with the promise of inevitable confrontation, I braced myself for the storm that was coming, a storm that would force me to confront the very heart of the deception that had torn our world apart. Determined to find incontrovertible evidence, I embarked on a path of covert observation. Every night after Bryony left for her gym sessions, I set out to piece together the fragments of her secret life. I installed a discreet camera in our shared space, a silent observer that would record any clandestine encounters. I told myself that I did it for clarity, to finally see the truth with my own eyes. The camera became my reluctant confidant, capturing moments that I had once hoped never to witness. The first days of review were agonizing. I found myself transfixed by scenes that shattered the illusions I had built over the years. There on the screen was Bryony, her features softened by dim light, as she greeted a man in workout gear. The man's confident smile and easy manner were impossible to ignore. I watched, heart-pounding, as the two exchanged what seemed like intimate greetings before moving to a secluded corner of our loft, where whispered conversations and gentle touches told a story of their own. It wasn't long before I discovered more damning footage. Over several nights, I witnessed Bryony meeting Darian, her gym trainer, in moments that were both tender and charged with unspoken desire. The images were clear, Darian's hand brushing against her arm, the lingering gaze that spoke of promises and secret passions. Each clip was a dagger to my heart, a visual testament to the betrayal I had suspected but had long hoped was not true. With every playback, I felt the last vestiges of trust erode away. The evidence was irrefutable. Bryony had been engaging in a secret affair, and the central figure was none other than Darian, the man she had once described merely as a helpful guide at the gym. The realization was like ice water poured over my soul, leaving me numb and hollow. Yet beneath the shock, a spark of determination ignited. I refused to be the passive victim of her deception. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. In the days that followed, I dedicated myself to gathering every shred of proof I could find. I searched through her phone messages, social media posts, and even reached out discreetly to acquaintances who might have observed unusual behavior at the gym. Every conversation, every anonymous tip, added another brushstroke to the picture of a life lived in secret, a life that I had been completely unaware of. I began to map out a timeline, late-night gym sessions, secretive meetups in the city's quieter corners, and a series of cryptic messages that hinted at more than just a casual fling. The more I learned, the deeper I sank into a mire of betrayal. I wrote down every detail in my journal, the ink forming words that felt like a eulogy for the love I once knew. With each new piece of evidence, my resolve hardened into a single, unyielding purpose. I would not let this betrayal pass without retribution. Yet amid the swirling vortex of evidence and emotions, I felt a pang of conflict. Part of me longed to confront Bryony directly, to demand an explanation, to hear her side of the story. But another, darker part of me whispered that any conversation would be futile. How could words ever begin to repair a love built on lies? The man I had been was fading, replaced by someone who had been forged in the crucible of betrayal and mounting fury. One evening, after reviewing another damning video clip, I sat alone in the darkened room, the glow of the screen reflecting off my tear-streaked face. I realized that the time had come for a reckoning. No longer could I simply gather evidence and stew in my silent agony. I needed to decide whether I would let this betrayal define me or transform me into something else entirely. The choice, though painful, was clear. I would reclaim my honor by ensuring that Bryony and Darian would pay for every moment of deceit. As the days turned into nights, I became more methodical in my planning. I studied the patterns of their secret rendezvous, the timing of their meetings, and the vulnerabilities in their carefully constructed world. I even began to follow Bryony on one occasion, watching from a distance as she slipped into a sleek, upscale fitness center where Darian worked. Every detail was noted, every moment recorded in the silent recesses of my mind. I was preparing for the inevitable confrontation, a confrontation that would not be resolved by words or tears, but by the raw, unfiltered force of retribution. In that charged atmosphere of betrayal and revelation, the lines between right and wrong blurred. I was no longer just a betrayed husband. I had become an avenger determined to reclaim my dignity by any means necessary. The evidence, once a collection of disjointed images and messages, had now coalesced into a singular, devastating truth that would soon demand its reckoning. And so, as I closed my journal on another long, restless night, I vowed that I would not let this secret remain hidden any longer. The truth would come to light, and with it, a reckoning that would shatter the fragile illusions of our once perfect life. The confrontation came unexpectedly one rainy evening. I had spent the better part of a week meticulously planning, my emotions oscillating between numb detachment and smoldering rage. By that point, I knew more than enough to tear down the facade of our marriage. I decided it was time to confront Bryony, not merely to hear her side of the story, but to make her understand that the price of betrayal was unforgivable. That evening, I waited in our dimly lit living room, the sound of rain pattering against the windows a constant reminder of the storm that was about to break. I had gathered the evidence, printed photographs, saved video clips, and a detailed timeline of her clandestine meetings. Every piece of proof was a nail in the coffin of the love I once believed in. I rehearsed the confrontation in my mind, each scenario fueling the determination that now defined me. When Bryony returned home, I could see the fatigue in her eyes and the faint trace of guilt that she tried desperately to hide. I greeted her with a calm demeanor, but inside, my heart pounded with an intensity that threatened to consume me. After a brief, tense exchange about her late return, I placed the evidence on the coffee table. With a shaky hand, I pointed to the photos and the timeline. "Care to explain this?" I demanded, my voice a mixture of hurt and fury. For a long, agonizing moment, Bryony was silent. The weight of the evidence pressed down upon her, and I saw the mask of pretense crumble. With tears welling in her eyes, she began to speak, her words tumbling out in a torrent of regret and half-hearted excuses. She tried to justify her actions by blaming the monotony of our routine, the allure of something new and exciting. But to me, her words were as hollow as the promises we once exchanged. I listened as she attempted to explain away the undeniable truth. She admitted to meeting Darian at the gym and spending time with him after hours, claiming that it was all just harmless fun. But in her eyes, I saw the flicker of guilt and the silent acknowledgement that nothing about this was innocent. The more she spoke, the more I felt my resolve solidify. There would be no forgiveness for this betrayal, not from me, not now, not ever. In that moment, the room became a stage for a drama far more intense than any I had ever imagined. My heart, once so full of love, now pulsed with a cold, unyielding anger. I realized that this confrontation was not just about demanding an explanation. It was about reclaiming my dignity and asserting that the price of her treachery would be paid in full. Unable to contain the storm raging inside me, I gathered my composure and spoke in a tone that brooked no argument. "Bryony, you have shattered every promise we made to each other. I trusted you with my heart, and you repaid that trust with lies and deceit. I cannot, and will not, allow this betrayal to go unanswered." My words, though measured, carried the weight of a man who had been pushed to the brink. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. But the confrontation did not end with just words. In the silence that followed, I made a decision that would mark the point of no return. I informed her that the truth was out, that I knew everything about her secret meetings, about Darian, about every whispered lie. I warned her that I would not stand idly by while my life was torn apart by her infidelity. I would seek retribution, and it would be both physical and irrevocable. Bryony broke down, the tears streaming down her face, as she pleaded for forgiveness. Yet, in that moment, I could no longer hear the sound of her remorse above the relentless beat of my own heart. The love that had once defined us was now a distant memory, replaced by the cold calculus of revenge. I left her standing there, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. As I sat alone in the aftermath of that confrontation, I felt a heavy mix of sorrow and vindication. The truth was laid bare, and the chasm between us had widened into an abyss. I realized that I was no longer the man who had once believed in endless second chances. I was now a man consumed by the need to restore my honor, a need that would soon drive me to seek out a vengeance that was as calculated as it was inevitable. The weeks following the confrontation were a blur of sleepless nights and relentless planning. I spent every waking moment devising a strategy that would ensure Bryony and Darian understood the full weight of their transgressions. I was no longer the gentle, forgiving husband I once was. I had been transformed by betrayal into a man with a single, unyielding purpose: revenge. I began by delving deeper into Darian's life. I discovered that, beyond his charming smile and effortless charisma, he was vulnerable, reckless in his personal life, with a penchant for risky decisions outside the gym. I scoured social media, talked to acquaintances from the fitness center, and pieced together details that revealed cracks in the facade of the man who had so brazenly seduced my wife. Every piece of information I gathered was meticulously recorded, a blueprint for the retribution I was about to unleash. Simultaneously, I refined my physical skills. I enrolled in self-defense classes and spent hours training at a local gym, pushing my body to the limits. Each drop of sweat, each bruise earned in the pursuit of strength, was a testament to the transformation occurring within me. I was forging myself into a weapon, one that would be wielded without mercy when the time came. Late into the night, I sat in the quiet of our now empty apartment, surrounded by my journal, photos, and detailed timelines. I mapped out every encounter, every suspicious event, and every moment of weakness I had uncovered. I envisioned a confrontation not as a spontaneous outburst, but as a carefully orchestrated reckoning that would force both Bryony and Darian to face the consequences of their betrayal. In my mind, I constructed vivid scenarios, one where I cornered Darian after a late-night training session at the gym, or another where I intercepted Bryony on a lonely, rain-soaked street, her eyes wide with regret as she realized the magnitude of her actions. Every possibility was weighed and measured against the raw emotion that now fueled my every thought. I also began to consider the broader implications of my revenge. It wasn't enough to merely punish them physically, I needed to dismantle the web of lies they had spun together. I resolved to expose their affair to the world, to unravel the carefully constructed image of perfection that they had maintained. I knew that a public reckoning would not only serve as retribution but also as a stark warning to anyone who thought betrayal could be hidden behind a veneer of charm and deception. Yet, even as my plans grew more elaborate, I found myself grappling with a bitter inner conflict. A small, distant voice wondered if, in pursuing this path of vengeance, I might lose myself entirely. Could I cross the line from justified retribution to something unrecognizable, a monster in place of the man I once was? I pushed those doubts aside, knowing that each moment of hesitation was a luxury I could not afford. The betrayal demanded action, and I was resolved that my actions would leave an indelible mark on both their lives. As I finalized the details of my plan, I felt a grim satisfaction settling over me. The path ahead was dark, but it was one I had chosen with my own two hands. There would be no mercy, no second chances, only a relentless pursuit of justice that would come crashing down on those who had shattered my world. With every detail in place, I prepared myself for the moment when the carefully constructed web of my revenge would finally be set into motion. The calm before the storm was over, and soon Bryony and Darian would learn that betrayal carries a price that I was determined to exact. The night had come, a rain-soaked evening that seemed to mirror the turmoil raging inside me. I had chosen this moment deliberately, when the world outside was as dark and tumultuous as the emotions within me. My heart pounded with a mixture of adrenaline and cold resolve as I set my plan in motion. I began by tracking Bryony's movements. She had, as expected, left for a late workout session at the gym, a familiar routine that now felt like the final act in a tragic play. I followed at a discreet distance, my every step echoing my determination. My phone buzzed with a notification, a message from an anonymous tip that confirmed my suspicions about a secret rendezvous. The pieces of my meticulously gathered evidence aligned in a way that left no room for doubt. Tonight, I would confront them both. At the gym, the fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot as I waited in my car. I watched the entrance until Bryony emerged, her face illuminated by a mix of exertion and anxiety. Soon after, Darian appeared, a figure whose confident stride belied the storm of chaos that was about to be unleashed. I parked a short distance away, my pulse rising with every passing second. I waited until the two slipped into a secluded corner of the gym, a back area rarely visited by staff or patrons. This was it. I stepped out of the car, every movement deliberate and measured. My mind raced through the plan I had so carefully constructed, each detail coming into focus as I approached them. The confrontation was swift and brutal. I emerged from the shadows and shouted their names, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. Bryony startled, her eyes widening in shock as Darian spun around, caught completely off guard. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. I saw the fear in their eyes, a mixture of disbelief and regret that cut deeper than any physical blow could. There was no time for words. Fueled by months of pent-up rage and betrayal, I launched myself at Darian first, an explosion of raw, physical retribution. The scuffle was fierce and unyielding. I landed calculated blows, each strike a punctuation to every lie that had been whispered in secret. Darian fought back, but his resistance was weak compared to the force of my anger. I felt every impact as if it were a measure of my shattered trust being avenged. Bryony's cry of anguish echoed as I turned my attention to her. I grabbed her arms, forcing her to face the reality of the moment, a reality in which her infidelity was laid bare. Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to plead for forgiveness, but my fury allowed no mercy. Every punch, every calculated strike, was a physical manifestation of the betrayal I had suffered. I was not merely punishing her for a momentary lapse, I was exacting a punishment that would leave an indelible mark on both our souls. The gym's back area became a chaotic tableau of violence and regret. In the midst of the physical confrontation, I shouted declarations of betrayal and retribution, my voice laced with the pain of every broken promise. I made sure that both Bryony and Darian understood that this was not a fleeting outburst, it was the culmination of every moment of deceit, every hidden meeting, and every stolen smile. Time blurred as the confrontation reached its crescendo. I felt as though I was caught in a maelstrom of anger and sorrow, the physicality of the moment merging with the emotional weight of my actions. The pain on my hands and the bruise forming on my face were proof of the violence unleashed in that single, fateful night. Yet, even as I fought, I could sense the shift, a subtle awareness that nothing would ever be the same again. As the rain continued to pour outside, the altercation slowly subsided. Bryony and Darian lay battered and broken, the reality of their betrayal etched into every bruise and every cry of agony. I stood over them, my chest heaving with exhaustion and a grim sense of finality. In that moment, I realized that my quest for retribution had reached its climax. A climax that, while delivering a measure of justice, left behind scars that no amount of time could ever erase. I left the gym that night knowing that the night's violence would echo through my life forever. The streets were slick with rain and the reflections of neon signs, mirroring the fractured reflections of a man who had been forced to choose between love and vengeance. I had taken back a piece of my shattered honor, but at what cost? In the days following the night of reckoning, the aftermath of my actions began to settle in like a heavy fog. I moved through a world that now seemed both alien and achingly familiar. Every whisper on the street, every sidelong glance, reminded me of that rain-soaked confrontation, a confrontation that had irreversibly altered the course of my life. The physical wounds from that night gradually healed, but the emotional scars ran deeper. I found myself isolated in the quiet of our apartment, surrounded by remnants of a life that once held so much promise. The police inquiry that followed was a blur of questions and stares, a reminder that justice, both personal and legal, had its own price. I cooperated with the investigation, my answers measured and devoid of the fury that had defined that night. Yet, inside, a turbulent storm of regret and satisfaction raged on. News of the incident spread like wildfire through our community. Whispers of the strange assault at the gym circulated, each retelling adding layers of myth to the reality. I became both a cautionary tale and a spectral figure, a man whose quest for retribution had become the stuff of urban legend. But amidst the gossip and the headlines, I was left alone with the echo of my own actions. Bryony and Darian disappeared from the public eye, their whereabouts unknown. I later learned that Bryony had left town, her guilt and shame too heavy to bear, while Darian's career and reputation crumbled under the weight of scandal. Their fates became a grim footnote in the narrative of my revenge, a narrative that, despite its finality, offered no solace. In the quiet aftermath, I wrestled with a bitter paradox. I had achieved the retribution I so desperately sought, and yet, the victory felt hollow. The satisfaction of physical revenge was tempered by the realization that nothing, no amount of violence, could ever truly mend the broken pieces of my heart. I found myself haunted by memories of that night, the sound of Bryony's cries, the sight of Darian's disbelief, and the echoes of every blow I had delivered. Loneliness became my constant companion. I avoided familiar places, shunned the once-cherished routines that had defined my life before betrayal. In their place, I filled my days with endless work, sporadic visits to the gym where I now sought solace in physical exertion rather than companionship. I began to question the nature of justice. Had I truly reclaimed my honor, or had I merely traded one kind of pain for another? Therapy sessions and long, sleepless nights brought me face to face with the question I had long avoided. Who was I, now that the man who once believed in love had been consumed by vengeance? The transformation was undeniable, a man hardened by betrayal, yet burdened by the weight of his own actions. Every bruise, every scar, was a reminder that the path of retribution left behind a trail of irreversible choices. Yet even in the depths of my despair, a small, stubborn ember of resolve flickered. I resolved to document my journey, a raw, unfiltered account of betrayal, revenge, and the aftermath. I began to write, each word an attempt to reconcile the man I had become with the man I once was. In those pages, I hoped to find a measure of redemption, a way to transform the bitter taste of vengeance into a lesson for the future. I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with uncertainty. The fallout of that fateful night would continue to haunt me, a specter in every shadow and a ghost in every memory. But in the solitude of my reflections, I recognized that perhaps this was the price of reclaiming one's dignity, a price that, while steep, was inevitable in the face of betrayal. And so, as I sat alone in the quiet aftermath of the storm, I prepared myself for whatever consequences lay ahead, determined to face them with the same resolve that had driven me to seek retribution in the first place. Time, they say, is the great healer, but as I look back on the wreckage of my past, I wonder if healing is ever truly possible. Months have passed since that rain-soaked night, and yet, the memories remain as vivid as if they occurred only yesterday. I wander through the days with a heavy heart, aware that the man I once was has been irretrievably lost in the tide of betrayal and retribution. The city has moved on. Neighbors, co-workers, and even old friends treat me with cautious curiosity, as if my pain were a relic of a bygone era. I try to immerse myself in work, in the creative pursuit of writing down every detail of my journey, hoping that the act of remembrance will somehow exorcise the ghosts that haunt me. But every word I write is tinged with a bittersweet regret, a regret that the pursuit of vengeance has left me more isolated than ever before. There are moments when I catch a glimpse of my reflection, a man with haunted eyes and a countenance carved by sorrow, and I am forced to confront the truth. My retribution has not brought the closure I once imagined. The physical violence, the brutal confrontation, even the subsequent fallout, each moment has left an indelible mark on my soul. In seeking to punish those who betrayed me, I have condemned myself to a lifetime of remorse and regret. Yet, in the midst of this internal desolation, I find a small spark of hope, a realization that perhaps the only way forward is to transform this pain into something that might serve as a lesson, as a warning to those who take love for granted. I have begun to share my story, not as a tale of triumph but as a cautionary chronicle of how unchecked betrayal can consume the very essence of one's being. I know that many will judge me for the path I chose, for the violence I unleashed in the name of retribution. And perhaps I deserve that judgment. But I also hope that my story will serve as a reminder that love, once betrayed, can never be restored to its former purity. The scars remain, a constant testament to the fact that some wounds run too deep to ever fully heal. As I stand at the crossroads of my own existence, I realize that the journey toward forgiveness, of others and ultimately of oneself, is long and uncertain. I have learned that vengeance, though it may offer a fleeting sense of satisfaction, leaves behind a bitter aftertaste that no amount of time can wash away. The echoes of that night, the weight of every physical blow and every shattered promise, will follow me forever. In the quiet moments before dawn, I sometimes wonder if the cycle of betrayal and revenge will ever end. I am left with a final, haunting question. Is it possible to reclaim one's humanity after it has been so thoroughly consumed by the fires of retribution? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in the delicate balance between memory and forgiveness, a balance that I have yet to master. For now, I continue to walk forward into the uncertain future, each step a reminder of the price I paid for love, a price measured not in dollars or fleeting regrets, but in the very fabric of my soul. I have become both the avenger and the wounded, the keeper of shattered vows and the reluctant witness to my own downfall. As I close the final chapter of this turbulent saga, I offer no grand epiphany, no neat resolution, only the raw, unvarnished truth that the path of betrayal and vengeance is one paved with irreversible choices. And perhaps, in sharing this truth, I can find a way to transform the bitter aftertaste of my own regrets into a lesson for others, a solemn reminder that trust, once broken, can never truly be mended. The echoes of my past will forever linger in the recesses of my mind, but I hold onto the hope that someday, amidst the ruins of what once was, there might emerge a glimmer of redemption. Until that day comes, I remain a man forever changed, haunted by the ghosts of betrayal, yet determined to seek a fragile, elusive peace. End of Shattered Vows. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.